what we spoke about last time is the general way he phrases or how he describes the godly soul's garments as opposed to the animal soul's garments. And we noted that the more typical tipo, the more the more typical way of seeing garments. Like if I were to think about it in my mind, and the way they're phrased, the animal soul seems much more reasonable. Someone asked me in the mail to elaborate on a sentence I said. The quote was that in a sense the animal soul is more reflective of HaKadosh Baruch Hu as an allegory than the godly soul. So I will explain that if it wasn't understood. We'll explain it again. And that's the point I'm going over now. That when you focus on the process of the soul that we're discussing here, the godly soul, and afterwards we'll discuss the animal soul. But when I think about my consciousness as it appears experientially, so then there's who I am, the essence of who I am, and there's what comes of that, the kochot, how I experience myself, the attributes of the soul. And then there's how I express myself outwards, the garments of my soul. Now, seemingly, the order I just mentioned now is also the order of how the process of a consciousness develops. First, I am who I am. Then I experience myself in all of my different attributes. And then after that, I express what I've experienced. So if I love something, so my love drives me to act in certain ways, to say certain things, to think certain thoughts. My garments are expression of what's going on within me, within my kochot hanefesh. Now, now that being the case, the reasonable way of thinking, the reasonable way of thinking of the garments of the soul is that they're a result. That's seemingly they should be a result of what's happening within myself, not the other. So I determined who I am, what I experience is what determines what my garments would be. There are no predetermined garments. That's what we spoke about last week. And that being the case, so what are the garments of my soul? How can I garment myself? How can I express myself? There's an infinite variety of ways in which one could express himself, all depending on whatever he feels like expressing. But about the godly soul, he says that the godly soul has 613 mitzvahs, which are, when doing those mitzvahs, those behaviors, those speech, those words, those actions, and those thoughts of the 613 mitzvahs are the only garments of the godly soul. So it's not whatever the godly soul says becomes its garment. There are predetermined garments. Yeah.
So I mean, from last week also, I had this question, but you'd say that the garments of the divine soul are predetermined. But if you take the mitzvah chnasis orchim, there's infinite ways it could be expressed. So why say it's predetermined?
Nachon, there are infinite ways it can be expressed, but saying that the godly soul can only express itself in that finite, infinite variety, but it's a finite, infinite variety. You can do any type of achnasas orchim, but it's not that you can do anything and it'll be a mitzvah. It has to be a mitzvah, and you can do that mitzvah in many ways. You can go to the shuk and you can buy any one of the esrogim. but it has to be an esrog, and if you don't shake an esrog, then you're not doing a mitzvah. So the godly soul can't express itself like the animal soul. I could decide to expressing myself by hanging lemons on my window. That's my art. People love that shtick today. So this is my thing. I'm expressing myself. I'm hanging lemons on my window. The godly soul can't just, again, it's an essential question. Is the expression a result of yourself? If all the expression is a result of yourself, then whatever you want to do becomes your expression. You can't finitize it because there is no
determined expression. What you decide to express, that becomes your expression. Saying that there are 613 mitzvahs is like saying that the mitzvahs aren't an expression of the soul. If they were just an expression of the soul, then anything the soul did should be an expression. But if you're saying it's finite, it's predetermined, then it's not just an expression of the soul. And that's exactly what he's saying here. The mitzvahs aren't an expression of your soul. The mitzvahs are an expression of Hashem's soul, which is the root of your soul. But all your soul is a specific drive of Hashem. And the drive relatively to the garments is predetermined. The garments relatively to your personal soul are predetermined. So that's what I mentioned last week that people asked about. That sentence, that the animal soul, in a sense, is more reflectant of a Kadosh Baruch Hu than the godly soul. Because if I try to think how Hashem views the mitzvahs, how does Hashem see the mitzvahs? So I wouldn't say that Hashem has 613 ways to express himself. That's not true. Hashem can express himself any way he wants. He happened to choose 613 ways, but completely random. There's no reason in the world why HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants tefillin. That's what he decided to want, and because that's what he wants, and now it's his will, it becomes a very, very valuable thing as a reality that expresses Hashem's will. But it's not that HaKadosh Baruch Hu found valuable tefillins and decided to want them. He wanted them, he valued them by choice, and that gave them value. So Hashem doesn't have 613 mitzvahs that he needs to want. He doesn't have 613 needs or 613 options of how he can express himself. No, he can express himself. This is explicit in Chazal in very numerous quotations, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu could have chosen any random number of any random acts and deeds that would then have become the mitzvahs. It's true that in reality, Hashem gave us his Torah, and in his Torah, he chose these 613 mitzvahs, but it's not that they were his garments. They became his garments. That is similar to the psychology of my animal soul. My animal soul doesn't have predetermined expressions. Whatever I choose, if I tell you, please bring me a cup of water, then once I've decided that what I want is water, and now, if you bring me a cup of water, then you've culminated my will, and I could be very happy about that. But it's not that I needed, I could have asked for anything. I chose it. Because I chose it, it became something that I value. And I can choose anything. And reality is that the person very often chooses different choices. And every day you get up and you feel like expressing yourself differently. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu, he's relatively much more stable than us. And he keeps wanting to say.
A quick question. What word in Hebrew are you translating as predetermined?
There's no word that says predetermined. It's just the way he phrases it is that, or maybe there is a word. I mean, the first words, what are the first words of the chapter say? Ve'od, in addition to what we spoke about the attributes. Yesh lekol nefesh elokit shlosha levushim. Every godly soul has 3 garments. That's similar to the animal soul, 3 ways of expressing itself. What are those garments capable of doing? Shehem machshava dibur u'maaseh shel taryag mitzvot haTorah. The thought, speech, and action of the 613 mitzvahs. It's not that any thought, speech, and action are the garment of the soul. Those thought, speech, and action. Now, it's important to notice that this is a logical feat because it doesn't make sense. If you understand the logic of what we're describing of the soul, it shouldn't be that way because a soul, the animal soul definitely is not that way, right? If I ask you what you want to do today, it's not that there's a set amount of options what you can do. No, you can do whatever you want. What do you want? And that's what you'll do. The doings are a result of your wanting. The godly soul, it's not like that. That's what he says. But the godly soul can express itself in 613 ways.
Okay.
I want to be more precise, and the grand majority of those mitzvahs you can't do. Grand majorities of the mitzvahs of the Torah are either in Beis Hamikdash or belong to a king or to a priest. I mean, there's a very, only 100 and something mitzvahs of the 613 are actually mitzvahs you can do. So there's a very limited amount, like you noted before. A mitzvah can be done in many ways. You can do achnasas orchim in this way or in that way. You can do it in many different ways. But the bottom line is it's all achnasas orchim.
Okay.
How do we explain that? We explained it because the godly soul, the part of the soul which is called the part of God, of godliness, which is called the soul, the part that enters my body, my personality, is only the nefesh, ruach, neshama, the naran, the three lower levels of the soul. And that's what he'll say in the bottom of this page, that really relatively to the naran, to my personal soul, garments don't stem from my soul. The mitzvahs don't stem from my soul. The mitzvahs are what Hashem wanted. And my soul is just the inertia of his will, which is already flowing in that direction. So if my soul appears, I will always find myself driven towards where Hashem is going. And those are the 613 mitzvahs. Now, if I were to ask myself how Hashem himself sees the mitzvahs, so he really sees them as something not predetermined. He could want anything he wanted. That's what I meant when I said that when you look at it that way, then the animal soul is actually, in that sense, more reflectant of the God of Hashem than the godly soul. Because the animal soul is like a full existence. You are your own essence. Whatever you want becomes your garments. Just like a Kadosh Baruch Hu is his own essence, and whatever he wants becomes his garments, become the mitzvahs that he wants. It's not predetermined. He can choose whatever he wants. But that's similar to the animal soul. Whereas the godly soul, what we call the soul, is only the part of the godliness which penetrates me and swoops me in the direction where Hashem is driving. Does that make sense?
Wait a minute. So it's got to be that the animal soul reflects the mitzvahs because we're doing them, whereas Hashem doesn't have to do them. So that's why you're saying the animal soul reflects?
Not that the animal soul reflects the mitzvahs. I'm saying that the psychology of the mitzvahs. Like if I try to very superficially think of a Kadosh Baruch Hu like a person wanting things. Right? That's the simple idiom in Chazal, in the Kabbalah. What are the mitzvahs? It's Hashem's wills. Hashem has will. Just like a person wants things, also Hashem wants things. And these wills, they express him. So when you do a mitzvah, you put on tefillin, then you are expressing a Kadosh Baruch Hu's will. In a sense, when I put on tefillin, that reality itself is a Kadosh Baruch Hu expressing his will. Because he wants there to be a person putting on tefillin. And when a Jew puts on tefillin, then that is the actualization. That's a Kadosh Baruch Hu managing to actualize his will. That's why Chazal call all the mitzvahs evarim de malka, limbs of a Kadosh Baruch Hu. Right? A Jew doing a mitzvah in this world is called a limb of Hashem. Like my hand. When I want to move my hand. So my hand moving is a manifestation, an expression, an actualization of my will. So same thing, HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants Shabbos candles. So when a Jewish woman lights Shabbos candles, that reality is like HaKadosh Baruch Hu, a limb of HaKadosh Baruch Hu expressing himself. That's how Chazal, that's the phrase Chazal use for the mitzvahs, they're limbs. Now, what's the psychology here? That Hashem wants things, and then the mitzvahs are what he wants. So when a person wants, which soul's psychology is similar to that allegory? So what I'm trying to express is that the animal soul psychology is similar to this allegory. The animal soul,
Okay.
when I want things, just like I said now, I want a cup of water. So I can want whatever I want. I can want a cup of coffee, I can want a cup of juice, I can want a cup of water. There's nothing's determining what I want. I can choose whatever I want. What I want becomes my mitzvah, becomes my will. Same thing with the Kadosh Baruch Hu. Kadosh Baruch Hu decided to want tefillin. He could have wanted round tefillin. He could have wanted pink tefillin. He decided to want black tefillin. It wasn't a necessity. He didn't need black tefillin. There was no such thing as black tefillin. His will is what determined what tefillin would be. Tefillin are what they are because HaKadosh Baruch Hu wanted them.
Okay.
Right? That makes sense?
Okay. Yes.
Also, the animal soul is that. That
Okay.
when I want something, what I want makes it my will. It's my will because I want it, right? Shana, you with me?
Yeah, I'm with you.
The godly soul isn't like that. The godly soul is different. Because the godly soul, my godly soul doesn't determine what the mitzvahs will be. Hashem wanted something. The godly soul is just the inertia of Hashem's will. It's like a predetermined will relatively to the mitzvah. The mitzvah stems higher than the soul. If I wanted to allegorize the godly soul in this allegory from the animal soul. So the godly soul is like the animal soul's already existing will. It's not the like, again, the godly soul doesn't choose the mitzvahs. You don't choose which mitzvahs to do, right? Hashem chose, and you find yourself wanting to do something. But Hashem wanted, and His will penetrates you.
So did you say that the mitzvahs stem from a higher source than the soul itself?
Definitely, yeah, that's what he's saying here in chapter 4.
Because they stem from Hashem's will, and the
No,
soul stems from.
No, the soul also stems from there, but they stem from a higher place than the soul's reality. The actual soul, I mean, you could say the soul itself also has a higher root. But the mitzvahs they stem from a higher place than the soul itself. Again, just like
But the soul is Hashem's etzem, and the mitzvahs are Hashem's will. So you would think the etzem is a higher place than the will.
The soul isn't exactly, because it's the etzem as it's been created. It's not the etzem. It's not the etzem. It stems itself from the etzem. That's true. It says that the soul stems higher than the mitzvahs. That's true. But the mitzvahs stem higher than the soul exists. I mean, the root of the soul is higher than the root of the mitzvahs. But the soul itself, not the root of the soul. So as it's embodied within my body, it's lower than the mitzvahs. Because the mitzvahs are what Hashem wants. And the soul is like the inertia of Hashem's will. If I said this in a human allegory, it would be like saying that if I want a cup of water, then my motivation is lower than the cup of water. Because the cup of water itself is actually what I want. And all of my drive to get a cup of water is only a means towards an end. So the experience of the drive, like that I start moving my feet to go look for a cup of water, the experience is lower than the cup of water itself, because the cup of water is what I actually want. Like you say in Lecha Doidi, Sof ma'aseh b'machshava tchila. The lowest actualization is actually in the most primordial thought. Like if you're building a building, or you're working, you're making an effort to build your house. So the earlier stages are actually less reflectant of your will. But when you finish building the house and painting the walls and you sit down in your living room, then that occurrence, that sitting in your living room, is actually more reflectant of the pleasure and will that drove the entire process from the get-go. More reflectant in much earlier stages, like laying bricks or painting walls. So same thing here, the mitzvah is actually what Hashem wanted. The soul, the soul within the body is the drive of the will itself. But what the will wants is the mitzvah. This is why also the soul also has 613 limbs, because it's like 613 wills. That's what my soul is. My soul, my godly soul, is Hashem's will penetrating me. When HaKadosh Baruch Hu's will penetrates me, that's why I find myself swooped away by Hashem. That's all of my godly motivation, all of my Yira Shamayim, my Ahavat Hashem. It's all what Hashem penetrates me with His will. But His will is willing. What does He want? He wants what He decided to want. So His will is already going in a specific direction, the 613 directions where what He wants. So I will always find myself experiencing His already decided will. So as far as the soul, as in the part of the motivation that's already penetrating my consciousness, that part, that soul, that's called the soul, that part that already penetrates the consciousness, that, as far as that part's concerned, the mitzvah is already predetermined. Because what the soul is the drive occurring towards the decision of the will. So in the root, the mitzvahs are Hashem's free will. But what the soul is after Hashem wants a mitzvah, He drives towards it. And that drive is the soul. So the soul already has a direction. It already has a goal where it's driving to. This makes sense?
Yes. It's a shame that the animal soul seems to have, that it gets to vote on its will. So it seems so much stronger in our general.
That's the whole tachlis. The animal soul has free will. The free will really only appears as in a concoction of the godly soul into the animal soul. Because your animal soul can do whatever it wants, has no it is its own God. It predetermines what it wants, and whatever it values becomes valuable, right? If I buy a car, so now that car becomes a valuable car because it's my car. If your car blows up, I couldn't care less. But if my car blows up, it's a big problem. So I cause the value, not because my car is more expensive. There's no objective value. I'm like a godly creature. I choose what to value, and that becomes valuable. Just like a HaKadosh Baruch Hu. He chose to value tefillin, and now tefillin are very valuable. So in that sense, the animal soul is similar to Hashem. That similarity is what surfaces free will. That it actually becomes reality, or a Jew's reality, is a true debate or combat between differing wills. There's what Hashem wants, and there's what I want. And if I overcome and allow HaKadosh Baruch Hu to express Himself, so there's an actual chidush here. Just the godly soul, there's no chidush in the godly soul because it's just a drive. It's a predetermined drive. It is Hashem's will. That's what the soul is. Mm-hmm. Only when you try to express it or to allow it to appear within the animal soul, does Hashem's will become something you can choose or choose not to. The choice is a result of Hashem attempting to express His will within you. That's called Dira B'Tachtonim. So the real mitzvahs can only be done this way. Okay, so in light of that, what's the conclusion? That the animal soul reflects Hashem more than the godly soul is because Hashem wants to appear in the lower worlds, in the lower realms. in the gut, which is yourself, your sense of self. So, but as far as we're concerned in the study here, I just mentioned this to notice there's a very big difference in how he phrases the godly soul's garments and how he phrases the animal soul's garments. When we reach chapter 6, we'll see about the animal soul. He doesn't say that it has X amount of garments. No, whatever you do, anything you do, those are the garments. Okay, so I hope
Yes.
that's settled.
Thank you. Thank you.
So we'll keep reading. So we reached.
Could I ask a question, please? I don't understand, but that's okay. But I just want to ask if I can clarify. Like when you said the godly soul is Ahavat Hashem and Yirat Hashem, and that's the drive. And is it that the animal soul is an expression of a mitzvah that comes from that drive? Like it wouldn't be able to do that if it didn't have an awakening in the godly soul?
I'll phrase it this way. You find yourself, you care for HaKadosh Baruch Hu. You value Hashem.
Right.
You feel value. Hashem is important. If I tell you Hashem wants something, that moves you because Hashem is important to you. That you feel that value. Sometimes we feel it more, sometimes we feel it less. There are big tzaddikim that feel it very strongly, little tzaddikim like us that feel it not so strongly. But every Jew has, to a certain extent, this sensation, right? That's called having a godly soul. That HaKadosh Baruch Hu appears within you as a drive. We could call it a will, we could call it love, fear. It appears in different contexts, but it's like you said before, it's a drive. Now, why is this the case? Why do I feel this? Why do you value Hashem? If I told you that, I don't know, some Chinese guy wants you to wear black boxes on your head, that wouldn't drive you. You wouldn't find yourself driven to do it. Maybe if I told you the Chinese person would give you $1 million, then you value $1 million. That value. But the Chinese person, you don't value him. So his will doesn't move you, it doesn't penetrate you. But HaKadosh Baruch Hu, if I tell you Hashem wants something, then you do value that. You have a sensation of his will mattering and moving you. Again, we're not tzaddikim, so very often that will of Hashem isn't so strong. It doesn't get us up in the morning and going crazy like the Rebbe, but it does drive us, certainly to a certain extent, and we do a lot of things because of that will. We feel Hashem's will, and it's precious to us. So what are we actually feeling when we feel our godly soul? We're feeling Hashem wanting something. Hashem wants, and we're feeling his will. He's in us, and because when he wants, then we experience his will. So just like when you want something, you feel motivated. So also when Hashem wants something, you also feel motivated. Again, for
So it's not up to us.
What's that?
It's not up to us. It's like Hashem.
Exactly. Hashem wants, and because there's a piece of him in me, so when he wants something, I find myself, or at least a little bit, feeling motivated. Again, when I want something, I usually feel more motivated. That's because I'm not a tzaddik. So I know my animal, I feel my animal soul stronger. But also when Hashem wants something, I feel motivated. And so if you learn a halacha in the Shulchan Aruch, and it says that Hashem wants something, then you care. It moves you. It moves you to do what it says there, right? That movement you feel in yourself, that drive, that's Hashem's will. That's Hashem wanting. And because he's in you, then when he wants, you also feel a drive. You say that?
Yeah.
But you'll only ever feel that drive towards something that he actually wants. So what he wants, you can feel yourself driven to. But if he doesn't want, then you won't feel a drive. You might feel drives from yourself because you want, but you won't feel your Hashem driving. And contemplating on the value of Hashem will only ever drive you in the direction that he wants, what he wants. Is that there?
Yes.
Now, he wants 613 things. So it ends up that your godly soul can only ever appear in 613 directions because that's what he wants. And what your godly soul is him wanting. Does that make sense?
Yes.
That makes sense. Thank you.
I say though, your animal soul is not like that though, right? You understand that?
Yes.
I don't want to make you go over it again, but I don't really.
It's not.
And if you transmute that into the animal soul, like, okay, so that Nagid, there's a blessed moment and that happens. And then does the animal soul pick that up and carry it out? Is
simply the animal soul is like pushed aside when that happens. Simply.
Is pushed aside.
Simply, why would I say pushed aside? Because again, we'll take the classic scenario, right? It's I don't know, it's Yom Kippur, you're at a Farbrengen, and suddenly you have like an enlightened moment where Hakadosh Baruch Hu's will feels very, very strong suddenly. You find yourself driven very strongly to do a mitzvah. It happens. Now, in that time, you're like carried away in that direction, and you forget all the other things that usually you're meddling with. So usually, if you don't feel HaKadosh Baruch Hu very strongly, so then the volume of life takes over. So you're worried about your mortgage or other things. When HaKadosh Baruch Hu's presence is very strong, so you just forget. You don't know. You find yourself forgetting the other things. That's what we call bittul all the time.
Okay.
Simply your animal, so yourself, you forget yourself. When there's something that carries you away, then you forget yourself. Now, bottom line is that you move your body and you move your feet and your hands and you do things. So your animal soul is that you don't push yourself aside physically. You don't go anywhere. I mean, you're still the same person, but it's itkafia more than itapchak. It's not that your animal soul has changed. It's just that right now, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is present enough that your animal soul is carried away. It doesn't notice itself. You step out of yourself.
Okay.
There is such a thing as saying that the animal soul itself changes. There's such a thing. That you, like a tzaddik, a complete tzaddik in Tanya does this. Or any Baal Tshuva, to a certain sense, does this.
But you're saying that it's his skafia more than his hafcha. I would think if you're not conscious of yourself, it's more his hafcha. His skafia seems you are conscious of yourself fighting.
Simply, hafcha means that such an experience becomes natural. That it's not like that we need to say all sorts of examples that on Yom Kippur and suddenly there's an enlightenment and it carries me out of myself. That's called, it's not myself. It's not my natural state of mind. Being a Beinoni, so our natural state of mind is where our animal soul is more pronounced, or it's more, you could say it's more superficial, but because it's more superficial, it's also more apparent. It's the front of myself. Right? The godly soul is deeper and more profoundly who I am, but deep, profound things aren't so apparent. So my superficial, simple life, I experience myself. And if HaKadosh Baruch Hu's will becomes very pronounced suddenly, then I'd call that being carried out of myself. That I call it being carried out of myself, that's called itkafi. Because myself, why are we using all these phrases? Because it's clear to all of us experientially that my sense of self is myself. And the HaKadosh Baruch Hu appearing is like ex machina. It's something other than myself. It's an addition. But Hillel, like the Alter Rebbe will mention in the next chapter, biggest tzaddik, so he doesn't see things that way. Moshe Rabbeinu in the Torah, he speaks about his godly soul in first person. right? So me and you, we couldn't stand up and say Anoichi Hashem Elokecha, because if we'd be saying that, that would be very strange. Because when I say Anoichi, I'm talking about me, I'm not talking about Hashem. But Moshe Rabbeinu, when he says me, I'll give you rain. His me, his I, is HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Okay, so that's called Ithap. The balance flips. So again, this is debatable, but I think the main point is to understand the point of things, that the godly soul is like, it's Hashem already wanting something, and His will is driving me. And because it's Hashem wanting something, then I find myself driven in those directions that Hashem wants. So if I I've learned Torah and I think about how great Hashem is, right? Like the meditations he discussed in the last chapter, Gedulat Hashem. So I find myself driven. Hashem's presence becomes more pronounced in my life, and inevitably, what Hashem wants is more valuable, sways more weight in my considerations, and I find myself driven strongly to where He wants. So if you come to a Farbrengen, and in that Farbrengen, the Mashpia speaks about the value of HaKadosh Baruch Hu and how much we should cherish Hashem, and it moves you, then you'll find yourself wanting to do mitzvahs. That's what you'll find yourself wanting to do, because you've connected to that part of you that experiences Hashem's will, and this is what Hashem wants. It's not what you want. It's not you concocting a will. It's just tapping into what Hashem already wants. So it's as if it's predetermined. Like, relatively to you, it's predetermined. For Hashem, it's definitely free will, but you're just connecting to what He wants, and this is what He wants. So you find yourself carried away in these predetermined directions. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you. Thank
Okay,
you.
so now again, this is mamash, the logic of the chapter. So we'll try to read like an abundance here now, after we said that. I think we read the beginning. We'll read it again anyway. He just expresses this in detail. So we'll read through it. So we said, "Lekol nefesh elokit shlosha levushim." Every godly soul has three garments. Shehem machshava dibur u'maaseh shel taryag mitzvot haTorah. The thought, speech, and action of the 613 mitzvahs of the Torah. Shekshe'adam mekayem b'maaseh, when a person acts upon kol mitzvot maasiyot, all the actual mitzvahs, ve'bedibur, in speech, osek bepirush kol taryag mitzvot ve'ilchotehem. He learns Torah and expresses the logic of the Torah in his mouth. V'machshava, and in his thought. Umasi kol ma she'efshar le'asig b'pardes haTorah. He envelops his thought in the thought of the Torah. Harei klalut taryag ivarei nafsho milubashim b'taryag mitzvot haTorah. So the 600, the entire 613 limbs of his soul are garmented, like enveloped in the 613 mitzvahs of the Torah. And I'm thinking about the mitzvahs, and I'm talking about the mitzvahs, and I'm doing mitzvahs. So all of my existence, all of myself, all of my personality, my mind, my understanding, my emotion, my action, my body, my limbs, my entire reality is like sunken, marinated within Hashem's will. When I do this, again, obviously it could be less radical. You could be doing a mitzvah with you're wearing tzitzis. Your mind somewhere else and your heart somewhere else, but you're wearing tzitzis. Okay, so then a certain amount of your motivation and a certain amount of your body and a certain amount of your action is enveloped in Hashem. So what he's picturing here is an entire image. A Jew is, when you're completely enveloped in Torah, your thought, speech, and action, your mind, your heart, then your entire self is enveloped in Hashem's will. More specifically, your intellect is garmented b'asagat Torah, is enveloped in the intellect of Hashem. Shu masig bepardes kfi yechot asagato v'shoresh nafsho lemala. And again, it doesn't matter how much of a Talmid Chacham you are, or how brilliant your study of Torah is. That's not the point at all. It's just your mind, you're using your mindly faculties, whatever they are, those limbs of yourself, and you're enveloping them in a Kadosh Baruch Hu's intellect. So no matter how, that's what he says here, no matter how large or how brilliant your extent of study is, it doesn't matter. If you're putting 100% of your mental capacity into learning Torah, so 100% of who you are is enveloped in Hashem. Because this is yourself inside the Torah. והמידות שהן יראה ואהבה וענפיהן ותולדותיהן מלובשות בקיום המצוות מעשה ודיבור שהוא תלמוד תורה שכנגד כולן. כי האהבה היא שורש כל רמ"ח מצוות עשה וממנה נמשכות. So he says the same thing about the intellect, also about the emotion. That when all of your emotion is a result of the drive of your godly soul, and your love and fear is towards Torah and mitzvahs. And you want to express, just like anybody, it's like any person. If your mind is set on Hashem and His value, then why do you find yourself, like the example we said before, you go to Farbrengen and you find yourself wanting to do more mitzvahs or be more machnis orchim or give more tzedakah, or you have a motivation to do a mitzvah, because it's like you're filling yourself with Hashem's presence, and it overflows into action. The garments are like the overflowing of the soul. Just like when a person's in love, so he feels that he has to do something about it. When there's a very intense experience, the stronger you feel it within yourself, the more it overflows into your thought, speech, and action. So much so that the thought, speech, and action express even more than your soul can express. Like you'd explode if you couldn't do something about your experiences. Right? That's the feeling. If you didn't have mitzvahs, then you'd explode. If you had nowhere to express your love for Hashem, and you thought very strongly about, you tapped in very strongly to experiencing Hashem's will, and you had nowhere to put that. Like if you have, I don't know, you have a child, you love your child very much. If you can't do anything about it, like you can't even pick him up or hug him or something, then just within yourself, you'd burst. The experience can't be contained. That's what he says here, that again, the mitzvahs themselves express the will more than the soul. So like in one mitzvah, you can pack in infinite experience. Again, just like hugging your son. The experience is infinite. But you can put it all in one hug. In one action, one doing can capacitate a lot of soul, a lot of spirituality, a lot of internalness. So the relationship between each of them is that on the one hand, what's going on within you is the drive of your action. You hug because you love. But the hugging catches the love more essentially than the love itself. It expresses it more entirely. Yeah.
Is it a sensation of like nishmat kol chai?
All of the prayers, all of the psalms are very clearly written from such a place. You can hear how the prophet is overflowing. That's also the stories in the Torah, that a person again, it could seem a little bit crazy. Also people with Jerusalem syndrome feel this way. They just walk around the street and they have something to say and they have to say it. Okay, but also the true prophet, he's also that way. Something's happening inside, and if I don't spit it out, I'm going to lose my mind. I don't. So the love and fear within yourself are the drive towards the mitzvahs. So when your love is, when all of your experience is from your godly soul, so all of your soul is being funneled into Hashem, into Hashem's will. So your mind is enveloped and your heart is enveloped. And now again, he stresses the point we made before. המידות הן יראה ואהבה וענפיהם ותולדותיהם ולובשות בקיום מצוות מעשה בדיבור שהוא תלמוד תורה שכנגד כולם. כי האהבה היא שורש, the love is the root of all of רמ"ח מצוות עשה. וממנה הן נמשכות, and they're all flowing from your love. ובלעדה אין לה קיום אמיתי, כי המקיימן באמת הוא האוהב את שם השם. וחפץ לדווקא בו באמת, ואי אפשר לדווקא בו באמת כי אם בקיום רמ"ח פיקודין של רמ"ח איברים דמלכה כביכול. So he says what we mentioned before already. You can't love Hashem without doing the mitzvahs, because this is what Hashem wants. So there's no such thing as loving Hashem without being driven towards mitzvahs. So your love of Hashem is always driving towards mitzvahs. If you really experience the love of your godly souls, you'll always find yourself driven towards mitzvahs, toward the 613 kiviyachol predetermined mitzvahs. So he wants to make a point that there's no such thing as serving HaKadosh Baruch Hu other than mitzvahs. Because if you care about Hashem, if your caring is really focused on Hashem, then what He already wants is where you'll find yourself driven to. But if you don't find yourself driven in that direction, then your focus was never on Hashem, because He wants something. So if you care for Him, you'll always find yourself wanting what He wants. And he says in the other way as well, that if you don't find yourself wanting what He wants, then you can be certain that all of the butterflies in your belly have nothing to do with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Because if it were focused on Him, then you would find yourself driven where He's going. That's what he says here. Anyone who's truly willing, wanting to cling to Hashem, these are the 613 limbs of Hashem, כביכול, כמו שכתוב במקום אחר. והיראה היא שורש ששא לא תעשה, כי הרי למרוד במלך מלכי המלכים הקדוש ברוך הוא. The fear of Hashem is the same thing. It's like a deterrence from anything that would take me out of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's will. So again, if I love Hashem, if my focus is on Hashem, then I will always find myself deterred from the things that HaKadosh Baruch Hu forbids. So if I don't find myself valuing and cherishing mitzvahs, then all of my focus on HaKadosh Baruch Hu has nothing to do with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. This is like a very basic concept. Now he says a few more madregas of ira, or ira pnimit mizo, a deeper fear, shemitbashesh begdulato lamrot einei kvodo. So the mitzvah, the fear of mitzvahs, of keeping away from things that are against Hashem's will, that's relatively a superficial fear. Deeper than that is just an existential fear. You could say it's like a fear of your sense of separation, a fear of yourself, of being yourself, a fear of forgetting HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Like we described.
What's limrot einei kvodo?
Lamrot einei kvodo means to be like opposed to Him in His eyes, kilu, to find yourself opposing.
To rebel.
Not limrod. Limrod with a daled is like to rebel. But limarot is very similar, but it's a little bit toned down. Limarot is like, again, it's to oppose. It's a less harsh word than to rebel. Even though he says later on, he also says rebel. It's the same idea. But the word limarot means to disobey. To disobey or to oppose HaKadosh Baruch Hu. I said oppose, not disobey, because here he's not talking just about mitzvahs. He's talking about existential opposition, like forgetting Hashem, ignoring Hashem. So you could say that you come out of that Farbrengen, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu is very valuable, and you're very driven to do mitzvahs. Simultaneously, if you're sensitive, you can notice that you're also simultaneously fearful of losing that feeling, of going back to yourself and forgetting HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Like before you came to Farbrengen, you didn't feel that way. And you don't want to go back to feeling the way you felt before. that's a fear of losing, like it's also an embarrassment. You're embarrassed to go back to your coarse self. That's called yirat boshet. So that's a deeper fear, deeper awe than just the fear of doing something against Hashem. It's the fear of being opposed to Hashem, or not even opposed, just ignoring, not being connected. לעשות הרע בעיניו כל תועבת השם אשר שנא הם הקליפות וסטרא אחא אשר יניקתם מהאדם התחתון לאחיזתם בו בשס"ה מצוות לא תעשה. Okay, but the expression of all of this bad is always the 365 mitzvahs that you're forbidden to do, the mitzvot lo tase. V'hine, now we'll say the culminating sentence.
Wait, you didn't translate that last sentence, that there, the Yanikasa me ha'adam hatachton, that whole business.
All of the places that you funnel what you're fearful of being is all the 365 mitzvahs that you're forbidden things to do.
The Yanikasa me ha'adam hatachton, what was this, but the Sitra Akra?
Adam hatachton means that this is where they suckle from you. Rather, they suckle from you. That again, if you ignore Hashem, you lose your sense of Hashem's value and presence, then you'll find yourself funneling your attention and your motivation into all sorts of things other than Hashem. That's called yenika. The klipa, just like when HaKadosh Baruch Hu is valuable and drives you, all of your motivation, your love and fear and drive is stemming from your realization of Hashem's value. So the same thing in klipa. Suckling sustenance from you means that you find yourself pouring value into klipa. So if Hashem becomes not valuable to you, you lose that feeling. So suddenly your mortgage becomes a very, very big thing. Or politics become very, very valuable. Or someone stepped on your toe, it becomes the horrible, horrendous thing. That's called yenikat chitzonim. That you're pouring value into klipa. You're taking something separate from Hashem and you're making it a ganze metzias. You're making it a big deal. So the klipa, it really, that's what sustains it. What sustains the klipa is that people pour value into it. Right? Like if the whole world decides that you have to have the new smartphone that just came out, so then that smartphone becomes a ganze metzias. It's like like an idol. Everybody's worshiping and pouring value into. And if a lot of Jews do this, then mamash, it becomes real. So real that mamash, it's hard to not buy the cell phone because it became so valuable. That's called yenikat chitzonim.
And v'chizasam, when they hold on to it?
They're clinging to you. They latch on like a leech. That's the phrase. Like the klipa latches onto you and suckles sustenance. And what's the sustenance? It suckles volume and value. Right? When I catch your attention, the klipa catches your attention and manages to get all your focus into something, then that thing starts like expanding. That's called latching on and suckling chayus.
Okay.
So that's all of the mitzvot lotas, all of the averot of the Torah are all what the Torah forbids you to grant value to things other than Hashem.
Right. That's also today's Tanya about giving energy to.
In today's Tanya, he says that when you do tshuva, then you're going to have to recuperate all of that excitement, all the attention you put into something. Right? If you devoted yourself to your cell phone very strongly, and you want to do tshuva and return your soul to Hashem, like devote yourself to Hashem, you're going to find yourself feeling that your phone's like tugging at you. Your part of yourself is latched on over there. And it's hard to drive out. It's called aliyat hashchina. You need to bring what you've resided in the klipa. You need to pull it out and bring it back to its source. That's called tshuva. So that's what he says here.
So should we stop here? It's
Yeah, we'll stop here. Nachon. Tomorrow, next week, we'll start. We'll continue from there. Bezrat Hashem.
wonderful.
Say that. A big shukr. Yaf, I can't hear you. You're muted.
Is it possible to send the,
Again. No, you muted again somehow.
sorry, is it possible to send the shir to Shoshana?
The only problem is I don't have YouTube anywhere. All you need to do is find the link, and the other links that I sent before. So this class, all the classes, they should be in the same place.
Oh.
So go to the old link, like one video before, one video after, I assume would be the continuum of our classes, because there are no other classes going up there, no other English classes at least. But when I find myself with an open internet, then bli neder, if I remember, then I'll send the link again. Anyway, this class from today usually takes a couple of days until he gets it up on the online.
Okay, we keep
I don't know, I
asking because
never
we can't find it.
Yeah, I see the mail, but I always see it when I'm either home or in yeshiva, and I have no access to YouTube in any of those places. I need to find myself in an open internet, and then I can upload it. So,
Okay,
when
thank
I
you.
hope I remember, and then I'll do it.